Okay, so advice and commentary, Portland, Oregon, part two. I'm going to talk. I've redone this video several times. I want to talk about the real estate here. The real estate here has a tendency to have been owned in the same families for a very long time, and it's become gentrified here, which is low crime. And then for real estate to actually change hands from one owner to another, they're going to charge a lot of money for it. And there's a lot of cashing in on that. So a lot of houses that were bought, 10, 15 years ago for 100 grand, 80 grand, 90 grand, 120, a lot of those places are trading hands at 300K plus. A lot of my neighborhood, right on my street, a lot of stuff is trading hands at very high dollar. And if something sits empty, there's people knocking on the door. Hey, do you want to sell this? Do you want to rent it? Do you want to sell it? People want to be here. One of my neighbors died a few years ago. His kids inherited the house. They've been fixing it up bit by bit. And I would say people knock on the door every week, or they knock on my door. Hey, does somebody, is this place for sale? Is it for rent? What's going on? We really like this location. We'd like to do it. Every time I see them, I say, hey, listen, I'd like to rent the garage out back. And they just hang on to it. Eventually what happened this summer, early in the summer, a predatory company had managed to get a hold of some kind of second or third mortgage paper that they were unaware of, and went straight to the foreclosure process and actually came out, sent a guy out to change the locks on the door. Nice guy, was an open carry guy. So I told him, I said, listen, I understand you do foreclosures. This house wasn't abandoned. There's no squatters here. The guy died and his kids inherited it. They live on the other side of town, and they probably are unaware that this is going on, because a lot of people have been offering to buy or rent this place. He goes, listen, I don't know nothing. They just tell me where to go change the locks, and sometimes I'm running into squatters and tweakers and all that. And I said, well, this is no longer that part of town. Part of the issue that causes that is because this part of town was designated as a black neighborhood originally. In fact, even in our local elections, the state representative here for this area has been uncontested in the last election. They actually put Republican, Democrat working families on his thing. His name's Lou Fredericks. He has a YouTube channel with like 60 or 70 subscribers. Hardly anyone knows who he is, but it's kind of like, let's call this a black neighborhood and let's put him in it. The blacks are, for the most part, cashing out because they're being paid very well to move. In fact, one of my neighbors, and one of the reasons he owns several places over, he's got sports stars hanging out, and that was one of the black families that have been here for a long time, and kind of a important guy in some union type stuff and all that, and sports stuff. So I don't know everybody who's a sports player and that kind of a thing. And but they're not going real far. But we're kind of like, golly, these guys are kind of like the namesake of the neighborhood. Now they're moving, and it's going to turn into a bunch of dickheads who just are into the high real estate value. And so I'm going to move too, because I'll be honest with you, I kind of like to be in a place that's got a little bit of character to it. I just want to be able to not worry if I leave something unlocked, and you get the best of both worlds when you get to live around people of different cultures who are wealthy enough that they're not the ones doing this stuff. And but you can't always live around sports stars and all that kind of stuff. The or union big shot guys, that sort of a thing. But what happens is the commercial real estate around here is also owned by the same families, and not the same families that own the residential stuff. When you get commercial landlords, residential landlords tend to be different groups of people. That's nationwide. They're just usually not the same breed. Residential landlords a little more hard scrabble. Commercial landlords a little bit more business oriented, but they can be also less caring and more ruthless, especially because business real estate ownership is more conducive to absentee landlord stuff. And that's an ongoing problem in the state, is that there's a lot of business landlords, absentee business landlords. They own the places, they bought them cheap, they can afford to let them sit empty, they can afford to let them go into disrepair, and they just don't care. Yeah, but if they think the business can afford to pay them top dollar, they're going to ask for it. And they don't have a problem with letting it sit empty. They don't have a problem with saying, okay, if you don't want to pay what I want, I'll let it sit empty. They don't have a problem with that. There's that flea breeder cat. Anyway, they don't have a problem letting it sit empty. There was a business here called Timberline Dodge. They had an auto body shop with 3 employees. The owner of the building was raised the rent from $6,000 a month to $10,000 a month because she felt like she wanted more income. She lived in San Francisco, owned here, and I told these guys, I said, yeah, they did that thing all over Marin County when I lived in Marin County. They just look at a business, they say things are stepping up, I want more money, I just walk in the door and say, okay, if you want to stay in business, you're going to pay me this much. The owner had to make a decision because of laying people off, putting guys to a harder workload. This was in 2008 when things were kind of down. Sales were down at the dealership, but he had to maintain a certain level of inventory to maintain a dealership franchise. So the number one money maker for the dealership was repairs and parts, especially auto parts, because the dealers have the right to buy at the true wholesale prices from the manufacturers, but you got to be an auto dealer to do that. And they had a relatively profitable body shop, but when somebody just went in and said, you know, we're going to raise the rent from $6,000 to $10,000 because I think things have gone up around here. I think and there was apartment buildings behind the dealership where rents were going up like crazy, and they were just basically trying to figure out what the pain threshold was for the renters. Well, they figured out what the pain threshold was for the car dealership, and the guy had to shut down the auto body operation because it was just too expensive. And then, piece by piece, the dealership had to shut down. Somebody retaliated against them politically. It's interesting because the owner of the dealership was also a friend of Lars Larson, who's a conservative talk show host around here. I met Lars Larson briefly on the phone. Thought he was a little rude, but when I listened to a show, then I realized he's kind of a jerk. I'm not a Lars Larson fan, but he had a lot to say about his friend's dealership being shut down when Obama did the what do they call that? The bailout type stuff. But then they were telling Chrysler they had to shut down certain dealerships. Well, these guys that own this place were put on the chopping block for that, and it was just mandated. Somebody at the Democratic Party told them, shut that dealership down. And nobody ever knew if it was this lady who was just raising their rent for the heck of it. Nobody really knew. But they just got their franchise yanked. And there was kind of a stink over it because these guys, I mean, we had Chrysler PT Cruisers brand new on the showroom floor for $10,000 and people just wouldn't buy them. They didn't like the guy. And I almost thought, well, maybe they got on somebody's, they got on somebody's enemy list somehow. I didn't understand it. And I don't know what happened, but what else happened was when they owned parts of the building, because this dealership took up several blocks in that part of the city. Other businesses tried to move in. They set up shop, but they all had to set up shop based on what they could make in a local economy. And a lot of them just they went in business and they failed right away because you just couldn't you know, everything had reached a pain threshold on the cost of the real estate. And that's the way all the apartments work in there. $900 for 60, 70-year-old buildings that were, you know, they were okay, but nobody had redone the electrical in those places. There was no pool, there was no parking, there was no fitness center. If you want all that kind of stuff, like underground parking, fitness center, indoor pool, all that stuff, you got to go to the Pearl District, where you'll get your money's worth out of that. And that's where the absentee landlords just didn't get it. And a lot of them are locals who grew up here, and then they moved to California, and they don't understand that if you're going to start paying over $1,000 a month rent, you know, we want the underground garage, you want the fitness center, the pool, the free cafe thing by the mailboxes. That's what you get in the Pearl District, and some of those places sometimes aren't even all that expensive, especially if you get it without parking. If you're renting the Pearl and you don't need parking, you don't own a car, you can use the mass transit. There's a lot of mass transit here, pretty good rail system, pretty good streetcar system, and that's what's attracting a lot of people from New York City, because you don't really need to own a car in this town. I'm going to be doing videos on the self-service taxi type thing called Cart2Go, where you get a little scan card, you go up to one of these little electric smart cars, you scan it on the windshield, and you got a car to drive for the day or the hour or whatever. You pick it up, you drive it. It's almost like an honor system car borrow thing. There's a few that they do it with private cars. We're low enough crime that people aren't really abusing that. There were a lot of people who criticized me because I had my truck in my driveway unlocked. Somebody got in and took a bunch of tools, and they basically, well, it's your fault, you leave things unlocked. People got to understand, this isn't normally that kind of neighborhood where you're going to worry all that much. I mean, this was somebody who knew what they were after. And I didn't name any specific suspects, but, you know, there was somebody who kind of did it, but can't prove it. You know, and I'm not going to say conclusively this person did it. In fact, I'm going to be announcing an award. I'm going to announce a bounty that if somebody can prove somebody else did it, like come up with my stuff, find it in a pawn shop or on Craigslist or something, and it was somebody else who has it and somebody else that did that theft, I'll pay a bounty to whoever found out the you know, where that stuff is and how that turned up. Plus, the guy who took a lot of heat for this, because we kind of think he may have, you know, kind of thinking in that direction, I'll go and I'll buy him a bunch of new tools. And I'll make a big public apology on that. But I got a feeling I won't be paying that bounty anytime soon. You know, but I'll double that bounty if this guy's proven innocent. But yeah, I'd double it for him. You know, if he finds out who took the shit, you know, I'd do that. But as far as real estate goes here, that's been one of the limiting factors, especially on the commercial real estate side. They're not afraid to let it sit empty. But if they like you, they like what you're doing, you'll be able to get that stuff really cheap. Yeah, and that's much of this city. And that's why the new development, which would go on more or less conventional economic and real estate models with business parks and stuff like that, tends to be on the fringes of the city. And then as far as the really cool parts, like there's an area here called the Hawthorne District, which is a lot like Haight-Ashbury of San Francisco in the 70s or 80s. Kind of a cool area. It's gotten expensive. You know, they'll charge you a lot of money to live there. But if somebody likes you, you can find these $250 apartments still, if somebody likes you. I'll tell a story about that. My first place that I actually rented, where I wasn't just kind of like paying to share somebody else's place, it was $225 a month in 2007. Yeah, 2007, 2009, it was $225 a month. 2009, the owner died. The family that inherited it of course, wanted more money. And they could only raise the rent so much by law, so they decided to move us all out and just sell the place. Now, that place, what we were paying that for, I think is around $600 a month. You know, 6 or 650. And it got fixed up nicely, but it's more expensive. The jobs around that neighborhood don't really pay any more than they paid before, so what they're really after is somebody who's got some kind of outside income and wants a lifestyle. And that's, that's where some people complain about this being like California, but a lot of it's driven by California taught, California engineered real estate interests too.